Welcome to Combat Brain, the podcast where we dissect every facet of combat sports. From the grind of gym ownership to the artistry of coaching and everything in between. Join us as we explore the minds and methods behind the world's most formidable fighters, trainers, and entrepreneurs. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just stepping onto the mat, prepare to expand your combat IQ as we dive deep into the strategies, stories, and secrets that fuel the fight game. Welcome to Combat Brain, where the battle begins in the mind.
Okay. Bruce, thank you for joining us. This is episode 3 with Combat Brain Podcast. Bruce is a BJJ black belt, a successful career data scientist. He's an avid competitor, loving husband and father of 2 young boys. Today, we're going to be discussing just setting goals in combat sports, primarily with Bruce's background in jiu-jitsu. We're going to talk a little bit about visualizing techniques, overcoming emotions, and improving your focus in your training. And Bruce will share a little bit about his experience throughout his jiu-jitsu journey of where he started and where he's at right now. So Bruce, thanks again for jumping on.
Thank you for having me, Christina. I'm really excited to chat.
Well, let's just start from the beginning.
Let's do it.
How did you get into jiu-jitsu?
I started jiu-jitsu in 2009. I had always had a passing interest, mainly in grappling. One of my few regrets, I think, is the fact that I quit junior high wrestling. I wish I would have stuck with it, especially now considering what I do in my spare time in life right now. I did a little bit of wrestling in junior high, and then I picked up a little bit of judo when I was in college, just exploring. I loved grappling. I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And I never sort of stuck. I never found the way to get into it. I went to grad school in Fort Collins, Colorado. And when I was there, I have this distinct memory. I started watching some more UFC. This is very much sort of the early days of UFC, like post Zuffa purchase and everything. But I was starting to watch it, and one day I don't remember exactly what motivated, but I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna try it. I've been hearing about jiu-jitsu, I read about jiu-jitsu, I watched videos online, and this is the wild west of online jiu-jitsu media. This wasn't the days of where there's flow grappling and BJJ fanatics. It was a couple of grainy montages on YouTube. And I called every jiu-jitsu and MMA gym within a reasonable drive from my house in Fort Collins, which was about 3 or 4 of them. And the first person to call me back the same day was Tessa McMahon, who is one of the 2 black belt owners of McMahon Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in Fort Collins. Funny enough, I found them because they were near my dry cleaner at the time, and I'd driven past. I was like, I'll give this place a shot. So that day, I was like, oh, can I come in and check this out? And they're like, oh, well, we're having a seminar with our head guy, Amal Easton, who is sort of the OG American black belt under Henzo, and really sort of the leader of all of Easton Jiu-Jitsu in Colorado. He was up doing a seminar, and I was like, well, can I come in and do that? And they're like, sure. So I show up, get my gi, do my intro class, and it's a big room, and we're doing escape bottom side control, and I get partnered with a guy named affectionately Big Richie, who is a literal 300-pound ex-lumberjack, who's the sweetest man in the world.
I know Richie.
Makes delicious pie, but a literal bear. And I did escaping bottom of side control with that man for my first jiu-jitsu class, and I walked out of it, I was hooked. I was like, can I just give you all the money right now? Can I sign up? I signed my paperwork, and I've been doing jiu-jitsu for almost 15 years since.
Well, tell me a little bit more about, I know you were at McMahon's for a little while, but I know that you did kind of transition into some other Easton gyms that had opened up in your upper belt stage of jiu-jitsu.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so my time at McMahon's was really tied very closely to why I was in Fort Collins. I was working on my PhD in statistics at CSU. when I started, I was about a year into my program. And I like to joke that I'm pretty sure jiu-jitsu added an extra year to my PhD. So I was there for my master's and PhD. So I spent about 6 years in Fort Collins, 5 years at McMahon's. But by the time it ended, I didn't want to leave, but I had to get a job. It was time to sort of move on and grow. I moved to Houston, Texas, and I had a postdoctoral assignment at MD Anderson Cancer Center there. And so I moved to Texas, and my only preparation for this was I took a look at the known jiu-jitsu gyms that I was like, oh, here are some potential candidates. And I found an apartment online that was somewhat in the middle of that and where my work was. I knew nothing. I never visited Houston. I signed a lease sight unseen and just picked up a random apartment. And it ended up being down the street from the place I eventually started training at, which was Hilly and Gracie Jiu-Jitsu down there, which was then run by a guy named Jamil Reyes, who actually was friends with them all back in the day in Brazil. Really wonderful guy. There was a really good group. It was a smaller gym there. There was, at the time, it was the only Hilly and Gracie location in Houston. Master Hillian has flagship out in Miami, but he would come out every now and again, and the Hillian was expanding. Houston has a really great jiu-jitsu scene, and even Texas in general has blown up ever since then. But so I was there mainly doing like academic statistical work and then jiu-jitsu. That's all I did. I made a lot of great friends there. I originally had been supposed to be there for about 3 years, but I got a job opportunity to move back to Colorado and decided to take it. So I ended my postdoc early and came back to Colorado. Actually, I was working at NREL, the National Renewable Energy Lab in Golden, Colorado, which has been a big circle because I went to my undergrad there at the Colorado School of Mines. And also more specifically, it was down the street from Easton, Arvada, which at the time was run by Nick and Chris Klein, the Klein brothers, who were a part of the same cohort as Finney and Tessa McMahon, as Elliot Marshall, sort of that first and second generation of Amal Easton black belts. And I was good friends with Nick and Chris from back in the day when I was in Fort Collins. We would get a group of us to drive down to train in Arvada with those guys. It's a smaller Easton gym. And it was really sort of just fate at that point because there's this Easton gym I'm very close with. It is the neighboring town to where I was working. So I just moved to Arvada and started working and training there. And I've been here ever since.
So just for timeline purposes, do you know about what year that was when you moved back to Golden?
That was 2015. So I've been back a part of Easton since 2015. So
that's crazy.
All Easton and McMahon, save for the 1 year in Texas.
Yeah. Okay. You're coming up on your 10-year anniversary at Arvada.
I am.
Yeah.
Looking back the other day, I realized I'm one of 2, maybe 3 of the oldest guard there. I've been through multiple management changes, through ownership changes, through COVID, through everything. So I remember the stories of the old time. I remember the old gym. I helped lay the mats in this place, and it's been interesting, sort of just seeing the place evolve around me.
Yeah, that's kind of a blessing for them that they have you there.
Yeah, I love it. It's a great vibe. It's a great vibe.
Well, let's I mean, that's kind of where you're at now. I know you're teaching because I come into your classes, but I kind of want to talk a little bit about just your strategies and how they've evolved over the years. Because obviously, as a white belt, when you come in, you're overexcited and you want to learn everything there is to know. But then, over time, you start to learn that it's more about like methodical learning and strategies and being focused on certain parameters of what you're actually retaining. So maybe just unpack that for me a little bit.
Yeah, I'll date myself because I'll be like, back in my day, I had to go read books with jiu-jitsu in it. There were like, someone would bring up an instructional magazine. Gracie Mag. I had Saulo Ribero's University of Jiu-Jitsu book, and like Mastering the Rubber Guard by Eddie Bravo, and all of these books. And so every now and again, someone would have an instructional. And I was sort of just like, oh, how can I learn this static set of moves and concepts and sort of shove them into my game? And I think that's the way a lot of people learn jiu-jitsu. And now the modern flow grappling, BJJ fanatics, YouTube instructionals, everything out there makes that it's almost worse because there's just so much potential choice for someone coming up to be like, oh, I want to work on XYZ, and it is so overwhelming. I really have taken great satisfaction as I hit my black belt years and begun to sort of look a little bit more inward, where it's not so much about getting, there's still breadth, but I really emphasize trying to figure out the core aspects of everything that I'm doing. And that's really what keeps me learning as I go through here, sort of figure out how these disparate positions and techniques and strategies tie together to sort of get to like the essence of like highly effective, aggressive, successful jiu-jitsu. So coming up, I think it was always a battle between those two extremes, between sort of trying to be deliberate about what I'm working on, but trying to do everything all at once. And you've been in my class. When I say this, I often close out class with just sort of encouraging people to like, just pick something. Like it really doesn't matter. If there's one thing people take out of this, it does not matter what cool thing you're learning. Maybe if you're confused, do what I just taught you in class. If you want to do something else, that's cool. If your motivation for it is, it looks neat, like that's perfectly fine. I think people worry about who is the best person, what is the best thing, what is the best way to do it. And it's, at most, you can draw inspiration and sort of learn concepts and techniques, but it's all really always going to be different depending on who you are and how you implement it and how it works for you.
Yeah.
So a lot of my strategy as I've grown in jiu-jitsu and gotten older and had 2 knee surgeries and faced down injuries and had moved more into coaching has been to try to demonstrate that, of trying to find spots to get obsessed over, sort of explore them as much as I can, implement the game as best as I could, share that with people, and then just pick the next best thing. It can feel like you're leaving a lot on the table, but it's the only way you ever make progress. And the rest will just sort of come. It's a long game. There's no shortcuts. Like, it doesn't matter. There's no shortcuts.
One of my old professors, Julie, told me I was standing in line with my blue belt. I had 4 stripes on it, and I was just waiting for my purple. I was dying to get my purple. And I remember her going up there as the end of class, and she said, hey, if you really love doing jiu-jitsu, who cares what color your belt is? Like, you're just going to keep coming and you just keep learning, and you can't learn it all, And that stuck with me. That has been something that I have never forgotten. And 10 years later, I still love it. I still keep coming. I do love that. Well, let's talk a little bit about, have you ever heard the statement, repetition is the mother of all skill?
Yes.
I love that. I think when I come to your classes or I roll with you, it feels like you've just been repping that out for the last like 30 days nonstop. So I guess what is your philosophy or your criteria when you jump into a new system or position that you want to learn? How do you kind of go about doing that?
Yeah. That's a really good question. I think a lot of it comes down to sort of the mindset leading into something there. It's that first and foremost, the thing I ask all my students to take away from it, like, even if they don't learn what I'm actually teaching them, is that unless you're at the very beginning of your jiu-jitsu journey, when you are a white belt, a blue belt, that stage of where you just show up and you just sort of, no matter what you do, you're just going to have leaps and bounds improvements. That is an addictive but transient stage of your journey. Because as you get better, and hopefully as people stick with it, you start moving towards the other end of the line. You start getting into those purple belts, those brown belts territories. And that's the territory where I feel people sort of have this curve where they lose sight of how to gain new skill and actually do it, because they sometimes get too caught up with like, oh, I just need to win. I need harder rounds. I need to just have that modality of only getting beat up to learn, and learning through just like being the lowest person in the room, which those days are great. There are some days where I'll get invited to a secret black belt training, or it's like a really tough room and like we sort of schedule things off book. And I am so excited to be towards the middle or bottom half of that day, because I just know it's like those days I get maybe 5, 6, 7 of those a year, just because they're infrequent. We're all black belts and adults with kids now, and it's tough. So you stand there as an upper belt and you're like, how do I get better? And I've got nothing but blue and white belts to train with. And I firmly believe that that's the best way to start learning, is a combination of training partners you can make mistakes with and sort of setting realistic expectations, and also just being deliberate. It's really easy to walk into a room and sort of just be like, I'm doing jujitsu today, and I do the same things I always do. And there are days where that's the right answer. There are days where my success criteria is a good round, maybe winning. That's what it is. I need to go hard. But a lot of days, and as someone who trains with me a lot, you can feel like I will choose a different way to fight in certain days. I'm like, no, I can drive the fight in certain ways. I can drive the match in certain ways, and sort of just try to give myself actual shots on goal of practice. Because deliberate live practice is the only thing that's going to do it. And from there, if you're saying, oh, I'm going to work on butterfly guard, I'm going to work on turtle, and you never actually went to those positions during your rounds, sometimes that's out of your control, but sometimes I can choose to go back into there. If I'm working on a guard passing system, I will pass their guard and just walk right back into it. I will do it again and again and again until I'm bored, which I won't get bored because I'm trying. My goal isn't to show that I can pass and mount and take your back and do those things again. Not in this round. My goal is to get those reps and those practice ranges of what I'm actually trying to get better at. So following that, the last thing I always encourage people, this is something I've started doing a lot more for myself recently, is just actual, like, even brief reflection at the end of the round, as you're leaving the room. Everyone who visits, I always close out class. I make the entire room sort of go down the line, and it's five or six words, a very limited sentence of what you were actually working on today. And everyone's job as they leave is to sort of have an honest accounting of themselves. There's many days where I say I was working on something and I did not really do it because of X, Y, Z. But that, coupled with some just like brief note taking in my car on my notes app, I have a running log of like day and sort of just what training was, how I felt, what I ate, like, did I feel good? Did something work? Like, more just to have that feedback loop of solidifying it in my brain so I can show up the next day and say, all right, today's goal is to work on this thing. I will have a successful day if I got to work on my new guard passing system. Hopefully it worked. Hopefully I have good rounds on top of it. But even if it doesn't work at all, it sort of shifts the mental like scoring function of what you're doing. You didn't have a bad round. You just found a bunch of ways not to pass guard. That's good. You needed to figure those out anyway.
It's so conflicting with the, I hate titling them as white belts, but the newcomer mentality. When they come in, they don't want to put themselves in a position that they suck at. They want to be in that position where they're successful, and they just keep going there, which is why the big guys are on top and the little guys are on bottom, and they end up that way for so long. And then they start kind of tailoring their training strategies around those weaker positions. I remember when I first started, I was not comfortable in mount at all for a very long time. But well, I think as you've kind of built some different training techniques across the years, what you have found works for you, which is great feedback for people that practice jiu-jitsu. How has that kind of translated into how you coach other people? Because they're so diverse. There's so many different learning styles and body styles, and some people are in college, some people are family oriented, students. So I guess, how have you taken what you've learned and implemented that into your coaching style?
Yeah. One of the first lessons I learned for coaching had nothing to do with jiu-jitsu. Actually, it was because coming up in grad school, I paid my way by being a TA for a good couple of years. And I'm very much aware of, if I can teach an 8 o'clock section of business statistics to a bunch of undergrads who don't want to be there, I can teach jujitsu to adults who want to be there. Like it's sort of this like sense of feeling comfortable in a room, which really, the reason that matters is I see this a lot in blue and purple belts who start coaching, usually in a fundamentals class. Maybe they start going into an intermediate class. And it's through no real fault of their own. It's just sort of a natural progression, is that the aspect of coaching becomes more of I'm proving to you why I'm up in front of you. Like, as a coach, I look at all the cool stuff. I look at all the neat stuff I can do. I will throw 10 things at you to sort of subconsciously prove that I belong in front of you, that I am a person of high skill, that I am a person that you should learn from. And I did that for a long time. Like, that's just sort of a natural progression with coaching. It can be hedged in an organization when you are at a fundamental level and you tend to have like maybe a stricter curriculum to teach.
Mm-hmm.
But once you start sort of getting some leeway to decide how to teach and what to teach, man, does that really quickly turn into an overloaded section of just all the stuff you can do. And while there's value there, the biggest thing I've learned is that teaching is a game of like just sort of knowledge transfer. That's how I think about it. And so, coming from a scientific and mathematical background, I think about these things in sort of a mathematical way. So for me to teach you how to do something that I like, let's say I'm actually good at it, which isn't always the case when I teach. First, I have to figure out inside my own head what it means to translate what I'm doing into language. From there, I actually have to stand in front of you and convey that in a manner that you'll learn. From there, you have to pick that up from what I've taught a room of 10 people in a way that maybe isn't exactly tailored to what you are used to hearing, or the way that you weren't paying attention, or there for any number of reasons. And then you have to figure out how to convert what I told you into motion that your body can understand, into the mental aspect of it, eventually into something that is a natural like state. So that is a very heavy multi-step process that is just every step is lost. Every step is lost. So this is why I obsess over making things simple, not in to make them easy, but to refine them, because I've realized that I really only teach one thing, maybe two, a class, period. And part of it is that in an hour and a half long class, if I allot 45 minutes for training at the end, you've got 5 to 10 minutes of warm up at the beginning as people sort of trickle in. I've got you for 30 to 35 minutes of instruction and practice for you. So that's not a long time there. So I need to make it as simple as possible to the stuff that really matters to sort of get you through. And then following that, I realized that in general, in my opinion, a lot of times the amount of time we spend on something needs to be dramatically longer. Mm-hmm. Too often it's sort of based, it's like, okay, they get it. I'm sort of standing up in front of you, repeating myself, and I get a little some subconscious weirdness about it. I now sort of like to love living that. I will teach you guys stuff until I am bored talking about it, which does not happen very fast. So you've been in a lot of my classes. I teach maybe 4 to 5 blocks of curriculum in my advanced class a year, which really means that I get to sit in sort of 2-month chunks, like 2 to 3 month chunks of long-term study and exploration, which means that when we start that section, I can spend a lot of time on some like very basic principles and like positioning or the core ideas behind it. And as we progress through that time period, every class is a practice of where we actually start. So by the end, even if you're not getting the new like hotness at the end, or the really cool, tricky transitions, or the sort of the sprinkles at the end, you've gotten the core practice and at least have had it shoved down your throat, because I am now tired of it 2 months later. Or we sort of reach a point of diminishing returns. But very often with instruction, we compress both those time frames. We try to overload a single class, and we try to transition between topics too fast for breadth. So I'm lucky enough I get to run an advanced program right now, which gives me the leeway to stretch that out and really give people time to have repetitions. It goes right back to the quote you're mentioning. It's like, if I can get you to have 2 months worth of guided repetitions where I can monitor your progress and sort of see how you're doing, you will get better at that. Like you will get better at it. I guarantee you. And I think that we've seen the proof in the pudding in a lot of the stuff that I've incorporated. So we don't get to do all the neat, fun stuff that I want to talk about, but I sort of pick these core blocks, and everyone gets better because of it. So.
I think for me, the two key criteria for me is quantity and quality. And you get all of that repetition whenever you're drilling or when you're going back to class on a regular basis. And it's quality when you have those newcomers come in as it evolves and you see those upper belts, they're really working through the moves. Like you're saying, you're really taking it apart and dissecting all the different positioning and weight distribution and getting to that high level when you go into competition. You have to do that. There's no room for poor quality drilling, and I definitely get that in your class. And if I miss your class, I show up and everybody is really good at this like high ground thing that you guys are going over. That was shocking. I should have been there. Well, let's talk a little bit about your competition experience. We can kind of start back on when you started. When did you start competing?
I started competing. I started as a white belt. I grew up playing competitive sports, mostly like I did team sports growing up. So I played baseball, I played tennis in high school. I've always enjoyed like competitive athletics, and that's something I missed a lot. And as an adult, like I did like maybe like rec league softball was always really fun, but I was missing that sort of scratch of that itch. And then also there's something I'd never gotten to do something like a combat sport in a true competitive setting. So I started competing. If I started jiu-jitsu in 2009, I had my first competition in 2010 as a white belt. I remember this. It was an early fight to win at the Magnus Arena down at DU. And I was so nervous. I won my first match by ankle lock, which does not surprise anyone, I think, knowing me. I just sort of grabbed his leg and ripped it. Blacked out my next two and lost my Americana twice, and just sort of like don't remember much of it. And that I was sort of hooked. I got really into competing all throughout every colored belt with some marginal local success, like ups and downs. I would do decent. I was always a bigger guy. So growing up in jiu-jitsu, especially from white belt on, it was a very big way for me to start actually having a goal for coming down in weight. So it really led to me being able to go down tremendously in weight, which gained back due to 2 kids, COVID, and not competing very much in some degree. But it was a really core aspect of it. I competed a lot at blue belt. We'd go out to Pan Ams every year. That was like our big IBJJF tournament. That was always like a fun travel experience that I did terrible at. I had an unfortunate setback. I blew my ACL as a blue belt in a competition, doing just shitty bad judo.
Let's hear the whole story.
Yeah, so that was I've torn my ACL twice. The first one was as a blue belt at a competition. It was a promotion called Grappling X. It was in Commerce City, so it was sort of in the weeds. And it was just me and this guy. I was probably about 230, 240 at the time, and he was equally sized. I just gotten my blue belt maybe like a month or two earlier, so I've been doing jiu-jitsu for about a year, and we're just ripped up, pushing on each other. I'm not good at judo. We just end up. I sort of wrap a leg looking for like an outside trip, and all both our weights are leaning on one of my legs, and I just hear a snap, a pop, and just sort of go down and tear my ACL. It was bad. I got wheeled off on a like a flatbed dolly like you use at Costco, like where they were trying to get to Julie's Hopenick's car. She was down there with me. So you're the professor you mentioned earlier. Julie drove me to the hospital and we got my knee checked out. Her and I have been very good friends for a long time. We actually got our blue belts on the same day together.
She's got some good absolute stories too that I might try and pry with her.
Yeah. So once I recovered from that and came back and went back down to weight, just lots of competing all the way through purple belt. A lot of this was primarily in the gi. I would do a lot of no gi as well, but I was a B player by like decision.
Mhm.
I would get irritated that I would do better in no gi than I would in the gi, like just in competitions. I think that might have been just foreshadowing for what was to come.
Mhm.
And when I moved back from Texas, I competed down there a little bit. When I moved back from Texas, I started training a lot more no-gi, or focusing a lot heavier on no-gi, just as a matter of preference. This is right when leg locks and heel hooks are starting to erupt into the meta. So this is EBI 1 timeframes. This is early Danaher death squad. So Eddie Cummings, Gary Tonin, young Gordon Ryan, even before him. And just exploring this sort of like new modality. I was having a lot of fun with it. I just liked it a lot more. Once I got to brown belt was when I probably had my biggest competition successes as a purple and brown belt. As a brown belt was when I really started competing on the Fight to Win Pros, because this was right sort of shortly after they started doing these super fight cards. I was Fight to Win Pro 1, Seth Daniels wasn't having any purple belts on the card. It was brown and up, so I wasn't able to do it. But then on Fight to Win 4, the next Colorado one, I was finally a brown belt and just started competing on these. And
who did you compete against again? Because
my first one. So funny enough, my first match was against Don Westman.
Yeah.
And Don and I have gone against each other a bunch of times, and I've enjoyed getting to know Don over the years. We that first match, it was going well for me. I popped the crap out of his leg. Yeah. I was like, got it. And he wasn't tapping. I was like, what is going on here? And he ended up submitting me like later on and caught a really bad toe hold on me. It was bad. I ended up competing a bunch more on those pro cards, and we ended up running into each other again at I forget to which one, but it was for the light heavyweight masters brown belt title. So one of the Fight to Win titles, which is actually right back there. Yeah. And that I got my revenge because I was able to beat him and heel hook him there. So I was able to win that. But yeah, I did.
Which match was it where you came out and like won in 20 seconds? You scissor sweeped the guy and heel hooked him, and I was in the stands and I was like, holy shit.
So that's one of my favorite matches, because that was I think the next Fight to Win Pro I had. So I had a 0-1 record, and that was against Phil Leitz, who is now one of the Easton GMs at our Longmont location. And Phil, we didn't know each other at the time, but Phil is one of my best friends in life right now. We've gotten to know each other over the years since then. I have artwork that I bought from him that hangs in my house. He is a wonderful person. We had dinner, like our families had dinner together like 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. He's just a dear friend, and sort of Allison, my wife, refers to him as a desert island training partner for me, because I have a sort of a small group of people that I would be like, oh, if I just trained with you for the rest of my life, I'm pretty happy. And he's someone that I've kept really close friendship with, but we didn't know each other then. And Phil's a great guy, and I had never thrown a live scissor takedown like that before. I'd thrown a few in practice, and I just decided, we tied up, and I decided, let's do it. I'm just pulling. It's an aggressive guard pull. Let's see what happens. And I caught it, and I was more surprised about that, and ended up finishing my heel hook after a few seconds of defense there, and never hit it again since. I don't really throw it ever. I've thrown it a couple times, but it's missed. But it was because everyone sees that video now. Whenever people would watch my matches on things. So
I wonder if
that was the second one.
If you Google Bruce, that's the video that pops up.
If you look, I think there's some ones on YouTube. It's on Flow Grappling. And that, as I started doing more and more of those pros, I definitely was getting scouted for being known for being a bit of a leg locker in those regards.
Well, it was new. It was pretty new at the time. And those scissor takedowns were kind of voodoo. I have to tell you this, after that match, I went back to training and I tried it on a couple of people, and Finney got so mad at me. He was like, Miss Christina, you cannot do that.
Yeah. It's something that I actively don't let people do in the training room unless we're practicing, just because the risk is so high. It can be done safely, but there is definitely some skill in how you do it. It's one of those ones where I'm not sure the juice is worth the squeeze in a lot of it now. Like, I'm fine if people don't practice it as much. Yeah, it's I learned a lot of it watching. I would watch a lot of Riley Bodycomb. He was a guy that I got a lot of inspiration on early on from. Who's Riley Bodycomb was a big no-gi grappling guy, but primarily came from a sambo background. I believe he's was based out of the Bay Area. He might still be out there, but he had in a lot of very similar motions of either scissor takedowns or rolling knee bars, which are like have like prevalence in certain sambo backgrounds. And I watched a bunch of those, like, I'm gonna do that. um, yeah.
Well, it was exciting. I was there for it, and I was like, "Oh my god!" Well, while we're on the topic of competition, I wanted to chat with you a little bit about just kind of how you yourself prep for a competition, as far as, you can't take all of it to the comp. You kind of your A game and you hone in on that. And I think I have a lot of conversations with people who are avid competitors that after the fact, when they don't get the result that they want, it's, oh, there's just so many distractions and I've got work and this. And, I'm a big advocate of don't worry about the distractions, improve your focus, So I guess just give us a little bit of summary on how you kind of prep for a competition as far as honing in on what you want to take to the mats with you.
For a long time, the thing I liked about competition was the getting ready for it and the recap after the fact. I actually did not terribly enjoy the actual act of competing. But I do think I think there's paths in jiu-jitsu for everyone that even if they don't want to compete, but I think it is the quickest way to highlight how things actually are, like the reality of it. As a personal sort of core value, I really strive to never fall into a form of self-delusion or lying to myself or lying to others. It's painful truth to me is more valuable than sort of a comforting lie. And that can happen a lot. And I think that's one of the beauties of jiu-jitsu, whether it's training or competing, is that it exposes that really quickly. Just it's fact. You're in a world of fact. You got submitted or you didn't. You know exactly how it went. When it comes to getting ready for a competition, as I've competed a lot over the years, one of the first things I realized is I need to make sure that I am willing to sacrifice / put the mental energy into the competition and actually treat it as important. There was a phase where I would get a little maybe big for my britches because I've had some competition success. I had a lot of success on big stages. And I would be like, oh, I'll just jump into this competition. I'll do it. Blah, blah, blah. I don't really care. I got a thing this weekend. And there's a difference between sort of being like, I'm ready to do this thing. I've got other life around it. I'm going to give it what I can versus sort of maybe trying to run away from the nerves by being overly comfortable or overly casual with it. And every single time I've ever done that, every time, regardless of the result, because I've had plenty where I've won a tournament with it and plenty where I've lost in the first round with it, I just felt like shit afterwards. Even on the days that I won, I was like, it did not scratch that itch. It didn't feel good. I realized that I was like, what am I doing here? Like, if I'm not actually going to take this seriously. So when it comes to like making sure that like my mindset is right is sort of the first thing. And then when it comes to like the actual like tactical competition preparedness, I try to have a better sense, at least like 4 to 6 weeks out that I'm competing. Sometimes that's not possible. Sometimes it's sort of a last minute decision. I try to avoid those if I can, but I realize it's more mindset and emotional preparedness for me than necessarily like new skill acquisition. For me, I know that if I get serious about something and I'm like 6 weeks from now, I'm doing this thing. It becomes a fixed point set in stone, and I can hold myself accountable and really just make sure that I'm walking in there, that I've actually did what I needed to do, what I could give to that I'm sort of walking in the door, like actually having prepared. There's no real time for new skill acquisition in that point. There's no magic formula. I think sometimes people like, okay, I got to get into camp and learn how to do jujitsu. And I'm like, if you need to learn how to do jujitsu, you shouldn't be in camp in the first place. Like, this should be a period of refinement, of tightening, of sort of like throwing stuff away and just sort of preparing yourself to get away from maybe my I'm learning and focusing on repetition to I'm honing and sharpening very singular things. And within that, I really try to build strategies around just core concepts and not so much like I'm going to do exactly this 8-point plan because it never gets past point one. But if I'm just like, okay, I just get higher than them, just get on top, just try to dominate head position. And knowing that my body and my skill will take care of the rest, and that I've trained like 3 to 4 to 5 times a week for 14 years, that work takes over. And I need to know that I can't, no matter what I can do, I'm not going to make up for that or change that in 6 weeks. I can change the mental aspect of it and the physical aspect. I can tighten up diet, tighten up sleep, tighten up nutrition, all that stuff, cut out alcohol, just sort of try to structure the family life around it. Because now I'm at a point where competing is not just a me decision, it's my wife and I and our family decision. And I'm lucky I have a wife who's been extremely supportive all throughout jiu-jitsu. Like early on, she's a blue belt herself. She's trained and competed before, but she gets what it means to me. And I know that if I care about something and I'm going to do a competition, that's a sacrifice for both of us. That's me being at the gym a little bit more. That's us having different schedules with the kids. That's us having different schedules with friends on the weekend. And that's really just sort of changing things. So for me, that really now is, well, jiu-jitsu takes away everything else that I would have on the plate, save for family and work. So if I'm in those 6 weeks, it's like there's no real video games for me. There's no like D&D. There's no auxiliary stuff. Because that time is what I'm doing to make up for what I'm trading. So it's really like focus and preparing myself to like actually go out there and do the thing. And then when I get to like day of, I really try to find this place of like quiet, calm, like intensity, but not tapping into aggression. Everyone has their different ways of psyching themselves up. I want to feel sharp and dangerous, but in control. That's sort of the feeling that I always try to find. Not mean, not rah, not like have to like go crazy, but knowing that like we slap hands and I will try to I'll take care of my opponent, but I'm looking to end this as fast as I can. Like that. This is gonna happen. I'm trying to dominate this match. Like this is no longer play. There's no learning curve here. I'm going to do everything that is my A game in every situation to you until I win. That's what I'm trying to do. And it's sort of switching that mindset to get ready for that is how I really like to think about it. And then coming out of that, sort of like get ready for the next thing and sort of figure out like my period of growth. Because those times it's hard to find period of growth in that compressed stage. Everything has seasons, and sort of figuring out what season I'm at with competition versus growth has been like part of that like retrospective process of like there's a bunch of competitions in a 3-month span. It's like, well, now's not the time to go learn some new crazy stuff. I might pick some stuff up along the way, but my goals, win these rounds to get better, sharper, and get bigger. Once I'm done, I need to go learn new stuff.
Pull back from competition and then kind of weigh in on those skills, building new skills. Well, Bruce, can you tell me about throughout your competition journey, like what are some challenges that you have faced?
I've faced a number of them. I think for me personally, like on a personal scale, I've always struggled with body weight, sort of like just size. I've always had sort of a frame that puts on muscle and fat very easily. I am at my best when I'm in a lot, like not light, but like lighter than I am right now. I'm walking around about 230 right now. That match where I had that flying scissors, I weighed in the day before at 185. So if I can get to like a 195, 205 range, I feel really good in there. Also, I just know that I do better at the lighter weights than I do against like a super heavyweight who's cutting down to 220 and like is jacked.
What's the highest weight? It's like, is it 225 and up?
Yeah, I believe it's 220 and up. So for ultra heavyweight and IBJJF. So you're like 220 is there, 215, depending on which one. It's Nogi. That's like that's the minimum. I never want to be in the and up division if I can avoid it. I'll go fight absolute, but if I can avoid it, I'm not going to be in an and up division. And that can be tough. Just like that's a longer tail process. So that's like, from a personal perspective, that's something that I've struggled with in the past. And it's just, it can add an extra layer onto things, sort of like making sure that I'm ready in those things. That being said, I do find competition is the thing that focuses me most to change that about myself. So I almost seek that out for that purpose.
Yeah.
I've had some injury problems. I've had 2 major knee surgeries. I've torn both ACLs, and in one knee it was ACL and meniscus. So I've had to come back from 2 ACL surgeries. Both times, I think the first time I got incredibly depressed. I was a blue belt. I've been doing this thing for a year that I loved. I knew I was in love with jiu-jitsu, and all of a sudden it's taken away from me. And I would show up to Finney McMahon's and just sit there and watch class with a knee brace on for weeks. Like, there was a silver lining in that when I started coming back eventually. One, my knees are fine nowadays. But when I came back, I did nothing but escaping bottom of side control and then bottom of half guard for 3 months. That's it. That's the only thing I trained, period. And to this day, that has paid extremely huge dividends. It's bottom of side control, bottom of half guard are places that I never really have to worry about for the most part. They're comforting old friends. I feel good escaping and dealing with stuff there. They're a good foundation to build off of.
Forced hyperfocus.
What was that?
Forced hyperfocus.
Pretty much. And similarly, when I tore my ACL once again in competition, this one time on a Fight to Win Pro stage, in a match that I was doing well in, I ended up getting to just be hyper focused on the back, both right before surgery and then afterwards. And so I've been able to come back from both those. So some injury problems have been things. I think the making sure to treat every competition as seriously, that competing is its own skill. It's very easy once I started doing these pros, it was a big deal to sort of be like, I'm on the pro. I'm that guy. I have a flying scissor on YouTube. And that felt good. Then the next week I got toe held by a purple belt in a competition and lost. And I was like, what the hell? Like, this isn't supposed to happen to me. But to that end, it's like, now if I'm competing, I don't care if it's a local tournament. I don't care if it's Masters Worlds. I don't care if it's a super fight. Everything's serious because I will still lose. I lost as a black belt to a purple belt, like at a Grappling Industries last year. I made a mistake, left a foot open, got toe held again. That's sort of a weak point of mine sometimes. And I was like, well, shit, that sucked, but if anything, it's a valuable lesson.
Yeah.
Other than that, I think being the biggest challenge is that this has changed as I've gotten older, as I now have a family. I'm in my mid to late 30s, depending on where you classify as 37. I like to think of it as I'm in the latter part of my mid 30s. That's how I describe it, late mid 30s. But my personal relationship with jiu-jitsu has changed. I feel it's become a lot more sustainable. When I was young and single or had a girlfriend who lived in another city, which my now wife and I lived in separate cities. She lived in Houston for first 18 months of our relationship. So it was nothing. And I had a very flexible job. I would train 2 days a week or two times a day. We would call and FaceTime on my way to training. I would get to train every night as hard as I wanted. That's it. I didn't even have a dog. Like, all I did was jujitsu to an almost obsessive point, to the point like not obsessive in the quest to be better, but obsessive in the point with more of fear of what happens if I'm not there, that I'm leaving something on the table. And this goes back to sort of the fear of getting left behind in competition and getting ready for it. When I'm actively competing, I think it's good to have a realistic sense of how fast you can acquire new skills. Like, sometimes you have these big inflection points because you just learned the perfect thing. And sometimes it can feel like, oh, I'm never going to get better. But the counterintuitive logic I've found is that if I hyper focus and limit the scope of what I actually care about to work on, and sort of trust that I'll learn the best ways to do every other position at some point in my career, that's where I actually get good enough at those things to have those inflection points. If I'm running around trying to get, I need to do wrestling, I need to do turtle, I need to do foot locks, I need to do bottom of half guard, I need to do all these things at the same time, I never get enough attention to actually achieve those sort of like game-changing results, which then when you're in a competition setting is a game of refinement and sharpening, if I have that in my pocket, that is just another place I can drive the fight. I don't care about everything else that's below the A tier at that point. Like I shouldn't be touching it unless something's gone terribly wrong. But the more things you can push to that A tier, then that's more areas that I can like actively dominate a competitive setting. And that's sort of how I think about it. It can feel like you're leaving so much uncovered, but I mean, you only need to be good at a couple things to really affect the competition aspect. A friend of mine who was a wrestler used to always tell me that when you're a wrestler, is like if you get really good at one move, you can win your sort of region. If you get good at two moves, you win state. Like that's really sort of like refining it. Like Jordan Burroughs has a million other skills, but his blast double is the greatest the world's ever seen.
Yep.
And he will do that to everyone in the world. If you spend too much time to not get to that point, then you sort of just throw like a mid-level game of everything at people and they're going to beat it.
Yeah, I agree with that. Was Bruce Lee says, practice one kick 1,000 times, not 1,000 kicks one time. You know,
Yeah.
it's better to definitely focus on one thing. When you get ready to compete, has anybody ever said, what's your game plan?
Yeah, I get it a lot. And I like to have an idea of how I would love the match to go, but I try to hold that like very loosely in my mind. And when I coach people to have that, I want them to have an answer for it, but I genuinely don't care if that's the answer that they really believe or it's going to happen. It's more of that they believe that they're going to win and that they have a plan, that the plan is that they're going to be there. They're not, I don't see the fear in their eyes. Like I have no idea what I'm doing. That's really when I ask that question as a coach, that's my check there. The biggest piece of advice I give people is just, go touch them first. That's really, that was something Finney said to me as a white belt. And it was just like, touch them first. Like just be first. And it is surprising at how much that can do mentally in a competition. So when it comes to game plan, for me, it's more about recognizing what those like A areas are, like really where the strengths are and having like an honest accounting and trying to like just be comfortable driving the matches there and not quitting and sort of like really like being dogged about it in those aspects. And if I'm saying, I'm going to get into this certain leg configuration, just sort of be like, okay, well, how do you drive everyone there? Can you do it to everyone in the gym? Drive the game there at some point. And if not, why? So when it comes to game plan, I think that's from a tactical perspective what I look for. Sometimes if it's a super fight, there might be a bit of like tape study or something there. I've sort of stopped I don't like to get too in my head about what exactly people do because then I sort of start fighting a shadow version of them. And I feel unprepared actually when I touch them and sort of like start doing stuff.
Yeah.
But other than that, I just really try to just make sure everything is sort of like sharp and ready. That's really when it comes to game plan. I tend to have a preference of what I'm looking for. I tend to know how my body's feeling. I tend to have a good sense of what are my strong positions and how do I really chain them together. And maybe spots where I feel predominantly weak or that if there is something that I know they're really good at, I'll spend a lot of time on defensive work related to it. If I'm going against someone who's known as a leg locker, I will spend a lot of my training camp just starting with whoever wants to be on whatever leg they want, just in the position and starting from there and just getting reps there. So I might plan some defensive structures around it, but that's really where a lot of it comes from. If I was in a more active competition environment right now, doing a lot more super fights, there'd probably be a little bit more refined practice for it. But I find that those game plans have gotten me pretty far.
So I think just as I start to wrap this up, I'm curious how all these skills that not just you, but anybody that's practicing jujitsu, they're learning in the gym, but how can they utilize those outside of combat training?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, it sort of comes down to this idea of just focus. And I think in modern society, I think a lot of people have recognized the lack of focus that we maybe not knowingly feel, but we sort of subconsciously feel. There's a lot of things in our lives that compete for our attention: family, friends, job, work. internet, social media, the world. And that feels very overwhelming. But the only way I've ever achieved any sort of inflection point in something in my life is when I hold two things true. And that's one, it's okay not to be the best at every single thing. It's okay to not even be good at every single thing. Like, you can just be surviving in every single thing. That's great. And then two, have one thing that you're actively trying to work on. It feels really overwhelming to be like, oh, I need to lose weight. So I need to lift, I need to run, I need to eat better, I need to sleep, I need to cold plunge, I need to sauna, I need to like start doing all these things. And you have a protocol list of like 12 different modalities, all like, and it's impossible. No one's got time for that. If you have any sort of like family life or like maybe a job that requires a lot of commitment. But if you sort of take it like one step at a time, this sort of sounds great, but I find it true. It's like, right now, my focus is on just dialing in my sleep. I'll figure out, like, I'll try not to eat like shit, but I'll figure it out as I go. But like, let's build that habit first. Then it's like, okay, the next biggest lever is I need to dial in food. Like, what's that mean for me personally? Then it's like, okay, I need to find a minimum effective dose of lifting or of being outside or of walking or whatever it is. If you try to move too many pieces at once, it can really set you back because you're either A, not giving everything enough focus, B, you're going to burn yourself out and it's not a sustainable path to growth, or C, you'll just get discouraged that you're not moving as fast in any single one of those as it is, and you'll just quit. And that really, that happens to me constantly. That's a constant fight. It's I was really into lifting and I was doing great there. And then 3 things happened and I was like out of the gym for a month and a half. And I was just like, life gets in the way. And I have a squat rack in my garage. Like, it's right outside that door. It's not far. So if given the chance, you'll make the excuse to avoid it, even if it's sort of like that close. So I think just like being kind to yourself and picking one thing at a time to try to get better at, not even the best, just get better. I think that's really the pattern of growth. And I know I'm giving a lot of like physical examples, but it's really in everything. It's the spending more time with kids. It's reading a book more, cutting down on screen time, just getting outside. It's drinking more water. It's really these like pick one thing, just hold the rest constant. Pick one thing, do it for 2 weeks, then maybe add another thing. And it really goes back to how I teach. Like, if I try to get you to do all 12 things all at once, it'll never work. Never work. But if I pick one, we do it for 2 weeks, add in another, do it for another 2 weeks, and we like just keep stacking. That's how that actually like works. And sort of being kind to yourself with it, like that. It's something is better than nothing. 80% is better than the fictional 100%. I am prone to montages in my head and sort of planning to do the work, and like doing the fake work of like, I've got the optimum training routine. Here's my spreadsheet. I should have just gone in the fucking garage and picked up a weight. Like, I would have gotten more out of it than this really like automatically like color coded like tracker if I would have done like a round of kettlebell swings. That's really the reality of it is. So I think that there's a lot of value in both those aspects. Focus and being kind to yourself.
I think for me, like the 3 things I always take away from jujitsu is it taught me patience. It taught me that I am not on the same path as anybody else, to, not compare myself to anyone else, and emotional regulation. And that has been the 3 things I've taken with me in my career and raising my teenagers, because I need emotional regulation with that. But it's definitely something that I think shows itself in other areas of our life, which I love. I really love it. Well, Bruce, I've got one more question for you, but I wanted to know your point of view on kind of the old school teaching of jujitsu, the tradition, the curriculum, the warm-ups. Everybody would kind of file in and do the same thing, and this new era of Danaher and B team and everything that's really flashy to all of the young athletes. I was just wondering if you could share your perspective on that.
Yeah. I've been lucky. I've gotten to train in a lot of different versions across that spectrum, both from like old school Brazilians. I've gotten to do classes with Hillian Gracie, who is legit best guard I've ever seen in my entire life. And like, he was in his 60s or 70s when I was seeing him do it. It's insane. He just is so refined. Two, I've trained multiple times at B teams. I have friends who train there. I've been there and gotten to see the high level of that room and the intensity of it, and the fact that everyone there is so young and doing it. I'm very much the old man in that room.
Mid-late 30s.
Mid-late 30s. Where I come in at it is I oftentimes try to help people distinguish between what fundamental means in these contexts. And I think sometimes I talk to people and they can say, oh, I just focus on the fundamentals. And it's almost used as both as a dig and a badge of honor, to be like, I focus on this very sort of version one of what was propagated as jujitsu, sort of like this very sort of traditional, sort of like core basic curriculum idea, versus I would say more like advanced, flashy, like craziness or something like that. And I don't think either one of those is truly right. If you look at someone like the fundamentals, you take someone like Roger Gracie, who is the GOAT, in my opinion, sort of the greatest overall jiu-jitsu competitor of all time, made a career out of getting to mount for like close guard, sweep to mount, collar choke finish. Made a career out of that. Mm-hmm. That is something we learn in the first couple of weeks. You're as a white belt in jiu-jitsu, but there is so much nuance and subtlety to the game that he is implementing under the hood that fundamentals doesn't mean simple. It's just sort of maybe means refined. And this is what we consider a lot of like old school fundamental jiu-jitsu is a version of like the first understanding of those core mechanical principles and tactical strategies of how to control someone leading to submission, and that were reproducible. So it's like the idea of like closed guard, being able to control distance from punches, be able to sweep, get to a mounted position where you could strike or get the collar choke or get an arm bar. These represent like really core philosophies, and they shouldn't be abandoned, but they should be sort of evolved and interrogated. So you see there was a time when half guard was flashy and new and crazy when Gordo was coming up doing it. I've been through the meta on everything that is now part of standard jiu-jitsu, but it's like De La Hiva, Spider Guard, Berimbolo, 50-50, weight or deep half guard, everything, leg locks, everything, you name it, I've seen it all now at this point. That's always going to be the case. People are going to discover new variants of this. But when it comes to like teaching style and sort of that idea, I found a lot of personal value in sort of the community that springs up with maybe like early on, that sort of traditional aspect. So I think finding ways to reflect that in a coaching environment. So as a white belt, it's like great jazz musicians. Like you need to understand music and before you can just start breaking the rules. Otherwise it makes no sense. Yeah. So I still encourage people to start in the gi. Like I train almost exclusively no gi. I do gi maybe once a month when I'm feeling froggy and want to have some fun. But I encourage people to sort of have that like refined like time to really sort of get obsessed with the sport and sort of go through those motions. Because one, there's a traditional aspect of it, and two, excuse me, I think it does start setting you up to be a part of a larger organism, a part of a larger community, that it's not just kill and be killed and sort of flashy, the flips and all this stuff. Having that is like where you could end up, I think is great, and sort of learning into that. So I think finding the balance there in a world that emphasizes coaching and community for a gym is my ideal personal level. And I've been lucky. I've taught everything from 4 to 6 year olds, the little tigers, all the way up through advanced adults. I've helped coach MMA fighters getting ready for fights. I've helped coach professional grappling athletes. I've gotten to do all of this stuff. And it really depends on the room you're in. I'm lucky at a point where I'm doing a lot of advanced stuff, so I get to open up those gates a little bit. But even then, I really just think about how am I going to help you acquire skill in there while building the community for you to sort of like build it yourself. And that's really what I look for. I think everything should be interrogated, but just because it's traditional doesn't mean it should either be trusted blindly or thrown out as like we're new, we're not traditional, because there's value there, but I don't believe in like dogmatic value. If
Mm.
someone teaches me how to do something, I need to understand why it works and not just, I always do this and put my hand here. That's a terrible way to teach, in my opinion.
Agreed. I've seen more gyms starting to teach kids that way.
Yeah.
Which I think has been really effective. All right, Bruce, anything else? Is there
No,
anything
I think
else
that's
that you
it.
wanted to share, like that I didn't include in any of the questions?
No, I think we covered a lot. Like I am very much at a stage where I care about like getting better at jujitsu. It's what drives me, but I also really focus a lot on teaching. I don't compete as much right now, given we have two small kids. Like my wife just had our second child, and so we have a 2.5-year-old and a 3-month-old right now, and we're just making it work. I'm surprised I get as much training as I can right now.
So why are you so busy right now?
Yes, who would have thought? There will be a point where I start competing a little bit more again, probably like in the next year or two, just sort of like picking up some bigger tournaments or something like that. But overall, I just, the thing I like to nerd out over is both jujitsu and how to get better at jujitsu. Obviously, by this conversation, I think a lot about it, and that's something I really get to workshop with people who come to my class. So thank you for coming to my class so much.
Yeah.
Come more.
I will. It's been busy. Have you ever thought about doing like tutorials or anything like that? I mean, has that ever crossed your mind?
I've thought about it. I've like filmed some content in the past, like some small stuff. It's just not something that has sort of fit the what's going on for me in life right now and everything. I've definitely thought about it. Just where with everything is, it's just one of the things got to give. It doesn't make the cut at the moment and everything. So most of the time now, if I'm putting out content, it's almost always either pictures of my kids, my dog, or my jujitsu class. So it's one of those three. Usually wrestling around set to really bad pop music, or like depending on my mood, stuff from the 80s, as you've been privy to. So
Who doesn't want a double leg to Taylor Swift?
So this is actually something I'll leave people with this. There is a method to my musical choice madness, and it's there's a bit of a so for people that haven't been in my class, I emphasize a lot of stand-up work in my class. Not so much teaching new techniques, but I think there's a major hole in a lot of jiu-jitsu gyms that both due to logistics or teaching philosophies that will teach some takedowns. So people either get like the 5-10 reps of like repping out something, or competition level like live training, where it's like, okay, we're working from the feet. You have one exchange, someone's on the ground, you keep going. So I've been doing jiu-jitsu almost 15 years, and I would say I've gotten the rep range equivalent of maybe mid-level blue belt at working on my feet. And that's something I spend a lot of time building out in my room, of just like, we start every advanced class with 15 to 20 minutes of live shark tank rounds from the feet, regardless of what we're doing before live rounds, just so people get reps. The reason why that Taylor Swift placed into this, or Katy Perry or Cascada or someone like that, is that I like to run a room that has a high level of intensity. And sometimes the music that accompanies that is like, I need a lot of like metal or hip hop, or just something like an aggressive montage. But I have noticed that in rooms where I modulate that with maybe a little bit more of a lighter, like poppy vibe or something silly, or 80s music or something like that, I can hit a level of intensity that's comparable, but it sort of nudges people in a direction that they aren't necessarily going like insane. They're not like raw. It's not like I might really get into playing like Slipknot or Disturbed and going crazy and sort of being like, I'm going to mess someone up today. But as if someone running a room, if I have 12 people doing that every time, there's varying sizes, I want my injury rate to go down. So there's value in sort of realizing that this is an inherently silly thing that we should take seriously, that we are just rolling around wrestling with our friends, trying to choke each other. Yep. I like to do that to Taylor Swift. I like to do that to Metallica. I like to do that to Bon Jovi. I think there's value in not taking ourselves too seriously and realizing that this is, while your body may interpret things as a life or death situation, this is not truly a life or death situation. So take the L, get better, don't hurt yourself. And that's sort of like, there's actually there's musical theory behind that. So that's sort of why I do it. Also, I just like doing it. It's funny. I think it's hilarious. So.
Well, sometimes when you let people choose the music, what are you going to say if they show up and they want to listen to Slipknot or Rage Against the Machine or Metallica?
Well, everyone gets a if they've won that right, they get to choose a couple songs, and I'll listen to it. But who knows? I might have to balance it out like after the fact or something.
I'll allow it for a little bit. All right, Bruce. Well, anything else?
No, that's it. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, Bruce, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. Thanks for sharing your stories, your strategies, insights. It's been nice to kind of pick your brain a little bit. So thank you for that. Thank you for your time. If our listeners would like to follow Bruce on social media, you can find him on Instagram at Bruce Checha, or you can visit his class at Easton Arvada, which is Mondays and Wednesdays at 6:30 to 8. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, that's a wrap for today's episode of Combat Brain, where strategy meets sweat and mindset fuels the mission. Big thanks to our sponsor, Guardian Gear, jiu-jitsu apparel that's built to roll as hard as you do. Stay sharp, stay humble, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Combat Brain.
Thank you for tuning in to Combat Brain. We hope you've gained valuable insights and inspiration from our discussions with experts in the field. Keep honing your combat brain, stay sharp, and never stop pushing the boundaries of what's possible. Until next time, keep fighting the good fight, both inside and outside the ring. This is Combat Brain, signing off.